I would like to present to you the work from Group 1 on individual privacy versus security. This is the team, which is comprised of Abhilash Reddy Maduri, Ashina Ya Onfori Aboye, Edwin Richard, Mario Moreno, Nikhil Subram Anayam, Ronak Shah, and Taylor Hawker. As with the Constitution of the United States, we do have a preamble. In the case for our project here, we're going to be talking about the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, and then how it falls in with the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Now, that is a subject more or less in line for a civics class, but what we must realize is many people are confusing the right to speak and the right of expression carries over to the internet, and that is not correct. The internet is going to be used interchangeably with the word cyberspace. Whatever you're most comfortable with is what it applies to. A perfect example would be the usage of certain symbols may be allowable here in the United States, but not within foreign countries. A perfect example going back to the days of video games is there was a game for the early 8-bit computers called Castle Wolfenstein. In that game, there were many references to Nazi symbolism. When that game was ported over or shipped to Germany, those symbols had to be changed and removed, because in Germany, you're not allowed to display such symbolism. So you would think that in cyberspace, what you say in the United States may or may not be allowable in Germany, and that is correct. Same thing for France and everywhere else across the world. What is allowable in one country may not be allowable in another. We all must realize that. So our freedom of expression in the internet and using various cyberspace portals are always going to be somewhat of a, at this current moment, law of the land. Now we're going to be investigating various scenarios and situations on these subjects and some common events which have sprung into extraordinary life with these real-world implications. In simple terms, we're going to be discussing various things which involve privacy, your freedom of expression, and how certain things do happen within the internet. This can be from the good, the bad, threats, and whatnot. Just a preview for some of the scenarios we're going to be dealing with is big data and the internet, vehicles, individual security and privacy, and then the threats which lurk in cyberspace. This section is big data and the internet, individual privacy versus security. Big data, in simple terms, is simply a vast collection of seemingly disparate data which is joined together via one common thread. You can consider someone's name, and we're going to use an example of like Tom Smith. Tom Smith may like to watch movies on the weekends, and we know this because of his viewership time on Netflix. We may know that he likes to eat microwavable food by his purchases at a local grocery store, and his house is worth X number of dollars, and this is the amount owing on it. And yes, he does have a used car, and he's married to his wife, Mary, and they have 3.5 kids. Big data would simply tie all that together so an advertiser could see, yes, this individual has these likes, these dislikes, how can we market information to them? Now, where do they get this information from? Well, I mentioned one of them, advertisers. Advertisers are the number one source of revenue for what? Social media. The three big ones now were Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. TikTok has more videos. This is more of a ephemeral thing where you go and do something hilarious or on a dare or to show the good of someone. Twitter is the infamous 240 character limit on trying to describe a complex subject, and of course has been used by various people in government and otherwise to start various flame wars, or in other words, attacks on each other. And then Facebook is where everyone supposedly shares everything, which unfortunately everyone seems to. Now all that information being pumped out there is simply not going away. It is pretty much going into a large data ocean, which these big data providers, which will gleefully suck up the information, repackage it, and sell it. Now, once they have this information, is it actually doing any good? So think about it. If they were to do a survey, say as Google is doing during the cold and flu season, where they turn over information on, hey, these many people in this area of the United States, for example, are looking at cold and flu symptoms, therefore there may be an outbreak. So then maybe increasing a greater collective knowledge may help local health agencies to gear up for a hard cold or flu season. Forms you will notice in the fine print, whatever you share belongs to them and it can be resold, repackaged, and shuffled off in various size containers. So, do you own what you share? Sadly, the information is no. Now, when it comes to control, when you think about your children in school, or we're in school, or the government for preventing and avoiding national security threats. In other words, some people love to disclose what they're going to do, which is illegal, immoral, or otherwise considered banned by the government. And once that is posted, people will come and check them out. Now, of course, one of the biggest questions is, once you share something, do you control it? Sadly, the information is no. If you read the end user licenses or the licensing for using any of these platforms, you will notice in the fine print, whatever you share belongs to them and it can be resold, repackaged, and shuffled off in various size containers. So, do you own what you share? Sadly, the information is no. Now, when it comes to control, when you think about your children in school, or we're in school ourselves right now, do universities, elementary schools, high schools, middle schools have the ability to censor? Yes, they do. That's under the COPA Act, which will be discussed later. But unfortunately, excessive filtering can lead to censorship. And this is an ongoing battle for educational facilities, as they must be able to share information with the children, but to do so in a safe manner. Again, a nebulous area at times. Now, the thing most people don't understand is, why would your governments, and this happens worldwide, be vacuuming up this data? And if, while they're collecting this data, while looking for a bad person or a group, what happens to other people in their inner circle? Well, unfortunately, they're going to get caught up into it. With big data, you can group people, and being, as one of the sources is social media, if you happen to be friends with someone who happens to be somewhat questionable and they lead to someone else questionable, of course, using the long tail theory, the governments will follow that, and you may be wrapped up into that and investigated. Do you ever really know if that's happening? No, you do not, until they possibly bring you for questioning, which may be a surprise to you, but then at which point they should explain why they brought you in. Now, the most pressing thing, it seems like, in everyone's mind at this time of the recording is the election. 2016 election was infamous for the interference from various foreign entities which use the tools available to advertisers to influence the vote, and that is the current mindset. This, of course, shows the vast reach of social media, and also how easy it is for a one nation state to launch a cyber attack upon another by using mind share. In other words, if we can sell you something better than what your government's offering, will you buy it? Sadly, for many people, the answer was yes. Now, when it comes to advertisers, yes, those lovely people want to sell you the 1995 pocket fisherman and everything else from days of yore. Do we really trust them? Sadly, most people do not. Now, I use the word sadly because many people also do not realize how much information is being gathered. We should realize that smart devices, or anything which is connected, which may be put on the generic Internet of Things, do collect data at all times, and it's being sold to advertisers and various other private parties. So do we really own our lives anymore? Unfortunately, once you invite these devices into your life, no, you do not. Now, as I will reiterate, with everything collecting data, we're creating a data ocean. Now think about an ocean. Can you go with a teacup and drain the ocean? Yeah, you certainly could. It's going to take a really long time. Now, of course, this is ignoring science and a water cycle, but the examples to be used that with all this data out there, who can use it most effectively? Right now, that's a question still to be answered. But when it comes to the security of the data, well, there is very little security for the data. The information in your Facebook is easy to be extracted. The information which is extracted by a third party can be compiled into a database, which is then not secured. Then in which case, what you thought is secured information or only for family members is now available for everyone. Is there a standard to this? No. Various governments do have various laws on data collection, but are they always followed? No. Perfect example is right now, currently Facebook is threatening to leave the European Union because they cannot conform with their data privacy laws. But as of this recording, there's still no movement on that. Facebook is still available there, and nothing has really changed. Now, once again, the biggest word here is assumption. What you assume is happening to your data and what is actually happening to your data are two different things. This could be an entire 100-slide presentation unto itself. But to summarize it, basically what you put out there can be used by anyone for anyone's purpose, and you have very little control. As I just said here, all these data pools flow into an ocean, and no one really approves of this data pooling. For example, when you sign out to Facebook and you say, you know what, I agree to everything Facebook says, but I want my information to stay with Facebook, that doesn't happen. Go to many of your local media sites, you'll notice there's a link to Facebook. What that means is it's going to create a hard link between the two places. So you make a comment about some local politician, that politician can simply scrape those comments and say, okay, this person from this area has this view of me, this person has another view. But meanwhile, someone who said, I want my information to stay in Facebook is going to sadly realize they'll be caught up in this data vacuuming, and the information is out there. We didn't give them permission to do so, but due to the wonderful legal morass of the legal system and of advertising, your information is out everywhere. Now, a lot of law enforcement says, well, we can use big data to mine it. I know for me, when I first started, I'm thinking, well, are we talking Bitcoin? No, we're actually more talking about the old coal miner going down to the mine, plinking away all day, getting black lung, and coming up with some nuggets of coal for some evil overlord of some sort of coal company. When it comes to big data, what this means is that various law enforcement agencies and other enforcement agencies will purchase selective data sets based on keywords. So in other words, as we see on TV shows, yes, you can look through a Facebook page or Facebook pages to look for the words bomb, gun, knife, etc., all those trigger words, and it will flag those people. Now, of course, it does not mean that those people are necessarily going to do something harmful with the said devices, but the ounce of prevention rule prevails, it seems, for these groups, so they always want to keep track of people who discuss such items. Now, when it comes to the issue of permission, many of the games people play, such as Flappy Bird and Fortnite and whatnot, do have a license you have to agree to. Now, because children cannot legally enter into any binding agreement, they need to get their parents' permission. But now when you think about the average child, if they want to play a game and they see this disclaimer saying you have to be this old and agree to this, that, and the other, do you think the child's going to read that or scroll to the bottom, click accept, just to join their friends? Fortunately, what they've done is they're now enjoying the game, but now they've exposed all this data to who knows who. Once again, what a child thinks is a minor little lie or fib now results in a huge data breach. Now, social media, of course, I know not to harp on it, but it is one of the best sources for data collection, as people are very willing to share information. It also provides connectivity for many people who are still homebound, as currently with the COVID crisis, many people are able to do video chats and whatnot using Zoom and other such features, but they do set meetings up through Facebook. So Facebook has a good and evil side. Now, all of this connectivity also has the side effect that the governments of the world can use that information to see how people feel, what they want to do, and everything else. This once again could fall under the greater guise of national security or whatever someone wants to put into it. So that little meeting you had with grandma may actually be tipping someone off to, hey, this person is leaving this area to go somewhere else. Who's their grandmother? Why are they going there? Hey, are they going to be posting along the way? Do their pictures contain something compromising, etc.? Now, we have been concentrating on the word security because, well, security unto itself is blurry. It's a mess. There's a lot of assumptions that things are safe. The biggest issue for banks in the beginning was that they wanted people to trust into these banks, these institutions, to give them their money and they'll keep it safe. Because if your house gets robbed and you lose all your money, you're out of your money. But if they robbed a bank, your bank's insured, so you don't lose your money. That took a long time for people to accept, but now everyone accepts the notion of a bank and they use banks. Now, when it comes to safety on the internet, there is no bank. There is no safe place. There is no refuge. So people are going out there sharing indiscriminately, assuming that some organization or another is going to be keeping their data safe and secure, but the reality is it isn't. That's because people are assuming security. Also, a lot of people talk about security, and it comes under the term of security through obscurity. In other words, they're going to say, yes, your data is secure. If you press them, they have no idea why your data is kept secure. They just know it's kept secure. In other words, if you don't discuss it, it should be secure because no one's going to find a way they're in. That's not the way security works, nor is that the way the criminal underground works. Now, when it comes to the bigger issue for countries across the world, we have a new term called data hoarding. In other words, during the infamous 9/11 attacks, it was well documented that advertisers knew more about the terrorists than the U.S. government. That was because the advertisers have a sophisticated tracking into what people do and where they go. So you have these vast troves of information, but how secure is it and why does an advertiser have it, not a law enforcement agency? Right now, we're coming up to the issue of who owns what data, who has the most accurate data, and are they ever going to share it? And then how does the law come into play on sharing? Now, the internet or cyberspace itself is so prolific. It is in almost everyone's life globally somehow. So there is no United Nations for the internet. There is no grand police force. Countries do enforce their own laws. Counties do, cities, provinces. However, governmental entities split up control. They all do enforce some level of control. There is no universal standard. So in other words, you can post a picture in one place, and if a picture is seen in another place, you could be committing a crime. Did you know about this? No, you did not. But unfortunately, until we all set rules for acceptable use, this is the issue we have. Also notice the word acceptable use is open to interpretation. I may find it acceptable to do X, Y, and Z. Someone else may say X is fine, Y is questionable, and Z is not allowed. We never have discussions, so the internet and cyberspace is sort of like the Wild West. Now, one country which has tried to confine and manage this information flow into a centralized and official distribution system is China. China has the Great Firewall, which is supposedly the world's most sophisticated censorship system, but it's always hacked and circumvented. Once again, showing the old modicum, sort of like from Jurassic Park, life finds a way, but in this case, information also finds a way. People want to know information. They don't want it filtered or sifted or presented in a neat little package. So people will circumvent these firewalls or whatever filters are in place. Now here in the US, well, it all depends. We're all used to going to any retail store before the pandemic, that is, and seeing cameras everywhere. Okay, that's almost a surveillance state, but your face on a camera doesn't mean much where your cell phone you're carrying is spilling out more information than you ever wanted it to. Now, who owns this information, who's going to control it, who keeps it for how long, and everything else is still up for debate. Currently, some public officials in some states are actually under the laws of disclosure. So in other words, a public official with a phone use paid by the public can have the phone records dumped and the contents heard. But if they use a personal phone, they cannot. It's like a conundrum. So do you always trust the elected officials to follow the rules? Well, once again, with the rules being so flexible and with the internet being what it is and data collection being what it is, we still have yet to set any standards. Now, in the very beginning, we almost understand the internet came from ARPANET. The ARPANET was a resilient communications framework designed to survive a nuclear attack. So when the US government initiated the ARPANET design, it was so universities and various other military facilities could communicate to each other if, say, a state was removed from the communications infrastructure. This allowed for rerouting so you don't have point-to-point communications anymore. Now, as the public internet became known and the military went on to its own version of an internet while still connecting to the internet as we know it, most people are used to glorified front ends such as America Online, Yahoo, and whatnot, where there seemed to be a very rigid system of to do this, you did the following, and you got the following result. Now, as those years went on, as people wanted more and more accessibility, well, new features came about. HTTP, the Hypertext Protocol, which designs the web pages we see, was originally designed for text. It's not designed for movies, not designed for distributing videos and everything else, but yet it adapts. So the old library model goes out the window because now we're pretty much using the internet like a series of roads and a bunch of shady little locations where you can go anywhere at a moment's notice. Now, that comes with the very obvious risk because in the real world, if you see a shady or questionable location, you tend to avoid it. Now, the internet, you can see something and it looks innocuous, safe. You click on it, and before you know it, you've now infected yourself. Oops. Like I said, the internet is very much like the Wild West. There's no one really patrolling it, so user beware, because you can make one click and that could be your last one of an uncompromised device. Now, security once again comes to those people who want to protect it. Now, it seems to be redundant. It's like, why would you want to protect your stuff and how do you do that? That's nebulous still. There's many courses, there's many books, there's many universities which teach this. This is security, and the answer is no, it is not. Security depends on the situation and what you're trying to protect. Unless you understand the entire ecosphere or the planet, the world, the universe that your data exists in, you cannot secure it against everything. So people will secure it to the best of their ability. Is that the most secure model ever? No, it is not. Is it changing? Yes, it is. And we continue to learn. Now, as for the government, do you think the government can step in and say, no, this information is private, such as FERPA for educational records or HIPAA for health records. Yeah, they can try, but unfortunately, what happens when you give permission for a third party to access that information? Take, for example, a smartwatch. If the smartwatch is keeping track of your vitals, are you not giving away your most personal information, your physical state, to a third party? Now, a third party can then use that information to see, well, okay, Mr. Smith, we'll just call Mr. Smith in this example, does seem to be overweight because he entered in his weight, and this is his height, he lives in this area, he's keeping track of what he eats, we know his blood pressure is this, his average walking speed is this. Now, before you know it, it's like that fitness watch should not be telling everyone about every detail of my life. But sadly, through integration, it does happen. And can the governments really control this? No. Because if you're thinking about it, man, HIPAA really should protect my medical records. But then if that fitness watch is giving away more than you wanted it to, you're really sort of giving everyone access, and that's not really intentional. Or at least we hope it's not. Now, when it comes to the internet, it's like, hey, we need to get to it. It's almost an essential utility. That's because information flows on it. We do not rely on libraries like we did in the past. Now, if you go into most libraries, yes, there will be books. Libraries have gotten smaller in some cases, but libraries do provide connectivity, either through some common shareable Wi-Fi or terminals. That's because people need to get access to information. Now, if you happen to be someone who cannot get to the library after hours, what are you going to do? Well, if you have a Wi-Fi enabled device, if you turn it on and see your neighbor's Wi-Fi, what's going to stop you from using it? Well, really nothing, unless your neighbor knows how to protect themselves. Now, of course, you're exposing them and they're exposing you to various security compromises, but do people think about that? No, they simply want to get on the internet, to go to TikTok, to go to Facebook, to go to Twitter and share whatever they need to. Now, when it comes to security, using an example of someone disattaching themselves to an open wireless point, where's the security for that wireless point? Who considers that security? You can assume that a closed ecosystem like Apple would be like, we only connect to this, this, and this, and then you're safe. But the real world is no, not everyone's going to simply buy one brand, and nor do we always trust one company. So everything must be interoperable, which means everything has to work together. And if everything has to work together, what is a common security thread? There isn't one. So what real security is there on the internet? There really isn't much. Hence the existence of big data and all this data vacuuming. Sadly, what people consider what they need for security and what they really get are two different things. Now, of course, I mentioned social media. Now let's talk about TikTok. TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. Per the Chinese laws, the government has to be involved. So Apple did discover that when users installed the TikTok app, suddenly TikTok was doing more than just recording a video or your audio. It was also taking system inventory, copying stuff from your notepad, and whatnot, so they sounded an alarm. Of course, so Apple adapted their new version of their iOS will alert a user if something from the clipboard is copied. But now think about it. If you're on your run, your phone buzzes or your smartwatch buzzes, do you look down to it and dismiss it, or do you let it go through? 9 times out of 10, a lot of people simply seem to love to dismiss alerts or they don't understand them. So while it tries to help, it really doesn't. As you can tell, TikTok has been copying information to transmit, so it's exfiltrating data using a supposedly known and trusted application. It's a no-no, but people aren't going to stop using it, so where's our conundrum? Our conundrum is if the vendor doesn't secure and the vendor wants to steal, then either the user stop using the application or they find a way for it to stop stealing. The issue is you really can't, because in developing applications, the core software used always has telemetry, which in other words means you install application A, it always wants to check, okay, what am I installed on, when am I used, and whatnot. This may seem to be meaningless data, but it is constantly being sent back and forth so the developer knows, hey, on this model we work well, this model we have these issues, this model we have this issue. But unfortunately, that whole telemetry and that background communication can also be used to exfiltrate data or send it out without the user's knowledge. Now this is a long paragraph, so please pardon me. I will give it a final thought read. Effective persuasion and propaganda were and are widely viewed as a relatively rational alternative to the extraordinary brutality and expense of conventional war. Persuasive mass communication can improve military operations without increasing any casualties. Its advocates contend, especially when encouraging a cornered enemy to surrender rather than fight. Similarly, by supporting the morale and improving the command and control of their forces, those who can exploit these techniques reap clear military advantages. More fundamentally, U.S. security agencies see propaganda and psychological warfare to extend the influence of the U.S. government far beyond the territories that can be directly controlled by the U.S. soldiers at a relatively modest cost. This is a statement by an individual who describes the entire science of communication. Understand, the whole debate of the blue or gold dress caused the discussion to occur. While people are discussing this, you can see ads for various politicians or something else. You can craft advertisements to target people. People subconsciously have values change or have a new value in by what they see. And not everything needs to be consciously understood. This is what this individual is talking about. We need to be aware that big data does allow people, whether considered our allies or enemies, to use our information against us, to target us, to change our mind on one subject or another. As I stated right now, what do you think our governments are trying to do with social media? It seems to be the invisible war, because you have corporations who control Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter, and they're not under the government's direct control. People always decry censorship and everything else like that, but since the government is not doing it, a private entity can always censor. But unfortunately, private entities also can sell data. So who in the end is going to control this? Currently, that is unknown. Now, funding for some of these organizations did come at one point from the government. So are they beholden to government rules and regulations? Again, debatable. It is something we're still not being fully understood. Our issue is communications change from the spoken word, from graphs and drawings, now to bits, information flying through the ether in cyberspace or the internet. And who's to say if you copy a bit that you're breaking the law? No one knows. Currently, that's something still under the debate. Now, as I mentioned before, the elections are definitely the superpowers going against each other on who can influence whose election the most, depending on the government structure and how effective your social media propaganda is. You may or may not do a really wonderful job of that, or you may not. There's several TV shows, books, and clips on even YouTube itself about this, but it is a subject which really does require a lot more discussion. So, as a final question to this, what are we sharing and what are we securing? If you drive home in a car, you lock it, you set the alarm, you go inside your house, you wave to your smart device that records your face, you lock the door with some smart system, you have conventional locks, you have a guard dog, you have everything you think to keep you safe. Meanwhile, in your bedroom is a smart device which you use to order another load of popcorn or maybe a new microwave. Are you truly secure? Or did you just lock yourself in with a spying device, which is going to tell the world everything? Consider the irony. Now, when it comes to big companies, right now, the big question is, how secure do we want to keep things? How much is the consumer going to let us get away with? Right now, it's been many surveys where younger generations do believe that information put on social media is always true. They're easily swayed. So why keep anything secure if everyone just shares anything versus an older generation which may not trust? Is there a common ground? Some people may say security or privacy, but the issue is generationally, no one even agrees on those terms. So with no agreement, there is no standard. With no standard, we're simply talking about it and not doing anything. Now let's move on to vehicles. Individual privacy versus security. Vehicles can include anything from your car, the bus, the train, the airplane you're taking to a trip to grandma's. Now, if we narrow this down just to our automobiles, most modern vehicles provide us with GPS, so in other words, we don't get lost. If we're driving to grandma's house, it will tell us turn by turn how to get there. Internet radio. No longer is it just AM, FM. Now you can have your favorite celebrity talk about their favorite seaweed wrap or who's dating who. And more selection, more entertainment is included in your vehicle's infotainment systems, and that's considered par for the course. Now, of course, one of the things people do not realize are the vehicle sensors. If you do watch any commercials, you will notice that more and more they are relying on, hey, your car will keep you safe because if you drift out of your lane, it will alert you. If you get too close to a car in front of you, it will slow down for you. All this is based upon an in-car sensor network, which, yes, has been expanded to allow cars to talk to each other and also back to the manufacturer. This is all being done under the guise of safety. But once again, you need to realize that your car is doing a lot as you're driving down the road. Now, people may wonder, where is this all being stored? The infotainment system, what used to be called a radio or cassette deck or CD player, or 8-track if you're really part of that generation, are now part of an infotainment system. That's what combines everything into one. It's considered considered the main heart or the main computer for the car. Now, the same device which gives you, let's say, a celebrity such as Howard Stern, why does it need to know about the conditions of your driving? You know, is it wet? Is it raining? Are you accelerating too hard, braking too late or too soon, etc.? Well, that's always questionable. Now, of course, you need to understand when you're talking about automobiles, you do not have a brain, you have several of them. Unfortunately, the infotainment system does seem to be the central nexus or location where the information is gathered and then transmitted off. Now, of course, this is supposed to offer security because the manufacturers know, hey, this vehicle has an issue with braking, or, you know, safety can be improved if we improve the braking efficiency and reduce acceleration, etc. But how much security is there? And last time I checked, when you purchase a vehicle, you do not sign a disclaimer stating, yes, I'm a free tester of this vehicle, and I will provide information to the manufacturer on his beck and call. So where's privacy? Like I stated before, information these sensors collect are your brakes, how much force is applied to the pedal, you know, for how long are you braking, whatnot, what doors are open and closed when you open your trunk, how fast you're going, when it's placed in park. Just think about anything in your car does, this includes trucks and SUV, is being recorded somewhere. Now, of course, some of these recorded features can help because they can tell us, like, yes, we find that it takes too long to go from park to drive, or the backup camera doesn't engage until this point, so it gives us information which can help us refine a car, which is great, but it also at the expense of how many people are sharing this information for a manufacturer to finally say, hey, yes, this is going to improve this vehicle. Sadly, it's not going to improve yours, but it may improve someone else's. Now, one of the other things that our infotainment systems do is that they use Bluetooth Near Field Communications, or NFC, to communicate with our wonderful phones and smart devices. Now, all these little devices are very promiscuous. In other words, they're always transmitting and looking for a connection. During this phase, they may inadvertently or intentionally transmit information from one device to another, including messages, device names, photos, maps, locations, and your audio library. Now, if you're going to go home, put all your latest hip tracks on your phone, and you're driving along, it's like, yep, I want to listen to hip track X, and you play it on your phone, it syncs with your infotainment system, and you hear it. Well, your infotainment system is also going to take note of, well, this time they played this track from this device, they play these other tracks. Did you ever ask the infotainment systems to do all that auditing and keep record keeping? I'm pretty sure most people did not. Unfortunately, it is stored and it is transmitted. Once again, you're a guinea pig giving a lot of information away, except in this case, it's being done a little more stealthily. Now, you're finally done with this latest and greatest vehicle. You get a newer one, and you're selling your vehicle back to a third party or someone else. And what happens to all the data in your vehicle? That infotainment system has a lot of information about you. Well, that information doesn't go away. I've read articles such as one here by Joy and Gerla where they're talking about, hey, all this information is in my car, I want to trade it in. Can you please make sure it's wiped before the next person gets it? No, that doesn't really happen. There's actually an issue where an employee from IBM's information security team did trade in a vehicle, and it was 2 years later, they still were getting vehicle reports from the vehicle saying, hey, John, you need to check your oil. Hey, John, you need to do this. So the new owner was driving the vehicle, yet the information was being reported to this original owner. So is the information white? No. Well, I guess we can just hope that whatever information your car has is not too sensitive because it's being shared, and no, nobody's erasing it. And even if they tried, is there really a process to erase it? If you notice in, for example, Ford vehicles, when they start up, you'll see Microsoft. So do you think Ford knows the answer to that infotainment system, or does Microsoft? And where's that instruction manual to reset the infotainment system?
Hello everyone. So my name is Ronak and I'm going to talk about individual security and privacy. So the concept of privacy and security is interrelated with each other. So the interconnected technology allows us with easy access to the internet, which has extremely become a vital part of our daily lives. The outcome of such has made us very dependent on cyberspace for economic, political, and social interactions. So the cyberspace connectivity consists of all the critical sectors of infrastructure that are vital to future growth. Cybersecurity and individual privacy, they are related to more information that is personal, which is stored online. So protection of privacy is increasingly dependent on the adequate security in cyberspace, implicated by the organizations for securing the personal information when both are in transit or at rest. The critical infrastructure of the cybersecurity protects and safeguards personal information. The cyberspace activities are monitored on the network for detecting any threats or malware that can affect the hacking of the personal stored information online. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about individual privacy now. So in the world of cyberspace, privacy is known as the ability of an individual to control its own personal information and the ways to use it. And in the business world, privacy refers to the controlling of the confidential data of an organization from the outsider. Uh, the confidential data are the privacy details of the organization's customer or visitor. For the protection of the data privacy, and the company required of a privacy policy, which is considered a statement of a legal document that defines the process of how the organization should protect uh, its privacy of the confidential data of its customer and clients. It also enables the organization to see if the information is kept confidential or is accessible to third parties. The right of individual privacy is often referred to as the right of so the right of the individual privacy is often referred to as the right to be let alone. The privacy right has two major branches according to the legal system. The first one is rooted twist, that recognizes four basic actions that cause damages like an intrusion, false light, and public exposure or public exposure of private details. And the other one is the Constitution, which protects the personal data against any unauthorized invention. The modern concept of privacy is regarded as the universal individual privacy. Next slide, please. Security in cyberspace. Cyberspace security or cybersecurity is considered to the practice of protecting and preventing the computer network, mobile devices, etc., from any internal or external attacks such as hacker or malicious attacks. It is referred to be the way personal information is protected from malicious attacks. Cybersecurity is also regarded as the security of the information technology or security of electronic information. Cyberspace has become an integral part of our life as the technology infrastructure of cyberspace has eased the manual pressure of our workload to much extent. Cyberspace is rapidly growing globally with an increasing number of data breaches every year. The security in cyberspace framework was discovered in the United States by the National Institute of Standards of Technology. This framework was created in order to fight malicious codes and to prevent technological devices from unauthorized access by hackers. This framework of security in cyberspace also recommends the real-time supervision and monitoring of the resources of the electronic media. There are several types of threats like cybercrime, cyber attacks, and cyber terrorism that need to be restricted by the security in the cyberspace framework. So these are the threats that can attack both the cyberspace and the individual privacy of an individual or an organization. Next slide, please. So individual privacy versus security in cyberspace. So individual privacy is often defined as the individual ability to control personal information and how they can use it. The personal information that is denoted as individual privacy is the identifiable information of an individual that are stored online and are protected by the security in cyberspace. It can be said that privacy and cybersecurity can be related to the same, but it differs from each other. It can instead be said that privacy and security are dependent on each other. Security in cyberspace is referred as the protection of personal data against any unethical hacking of unauthorized access. Security in cyberspace controls the information accessibility, which the privacy is more powdered in controlling the ways the individual can access the particular data. For instance, if the user has a bank account in a bank with the National Institute of Finance, all the bank employees will be able to get access to the user's account details. So with this facility, it provides the user with the flexibility to visit the bank branch anywhere in the country. So in privacy, the user's particular details uh, can also secure the user's data. The security framework is put to restrict the access of any uncertified user into the secure private information. Next slide, please. The advancement in technology has increased the growth of internet usage rapidly in our life. Cyberspace has faced the biggest transformation, and a considerable amount of information or data that has already been switched to online storage. It is the most debatable topic, as many security professionals and consumers can rarely be able to differentiate between privacy and security in cyberspace. Uh, the privacy of an individual's personally identifiable information is stored online, and that stored data is prevented and stored safely online with the help of security in the cyberspace framework. In the business world, the security framework is installed for defending its confidential data that are private to the organization. The cyberspace security framework helps the organization to control, to actually combat the malicious risk, threats, and unauthorized user access into the internal management system and privacy of the organizational network infrastructure. The privacy policies are also followed by the organization in order to secure the privacy of the organization from third parties. Even if the privacy and security differ from each other, they are not opposite from each other. The user doesn't have to accept less of one to get more of the other. The interconnection of security and privacy is just like the thief alarm and a tall fence. Privacy is only affected by security when the prevention of privacy is based on identity, and there involve certain limitations to that kind of offer. Uh, Therefore, it can be said that if there is no security, like, there is no privacy. Even if both the aspects differ from each other, one cannot have the value if the other one doesn't exist. So that is if like there is no privacy to protect, the security system's core aim of existence will be useless. Uh, if there is no privacy to protect the security systems, the security system will be useless. People perceive both individual security and privacy completely differently from what they actually entail. The impression of what both of these very technical terms and what they actually mean and how they play out are typically on opposite ends of the spectrum. So in very broad terms, individual security protects one's data, while privacy protects oneself. Someone's perception of an individual security will differ from reality, as will privacy. The world we live the world we live in is definitely not what one would hope to play out from history. Though history does repeat itself, individual security and privacy are not things anyone should mess around with. You can really demolish someone by invading their privacy and not keeping their data as secure as it should be. Okay, so now my teammate will take it from here.
Hi, thank you for explaining so well. So now we'll discuss about threats in cyberspace. So basically, when you say threats, uh, all the people these days are very much into the cyber world. So internet, it's basically everyone is with the business where internet is a must. So, for instance, if you see USPS or UPS or FedEx shipping people, they just do every single things through the internet. So, if you compare this with the olden days, it was like writing a letter and sending it to the post office, and then they take another week to reach. So now it's within a click of a button, you send whatever message through an email or anything, for instance, when it comes to internet. So there are disadvantages when the internet is also very popular. Even the threats also increases. So it's almost to tell like where there's advantages, there are definitely disadvantages too. So in this slide, we'll be discussing about threats in cyberspace and what are the major concerns that are in the cyberspace threats. So next slide. Yeah. So, when it comes to threats in cyberspace, the three factors that we need to consider is integrity, confidentiality, availability. So, these factors must be covered when you're building an application or when you're hosting it or something like that. So, for instance, what do you mean by integrity? So, integrity is something it used to prevent any modification or deletion or anything in some unauthorized manner. So without your knowledge, if someone goes and deletes your identity or something like that, so that's what basically integrity is. So next is confidentiality. So when it comes to confidentiality, it's basically what it tells, like uh, it's like government related stuff. They're very confidential. It's not open to the public and all those stuff. So you need to keep secrecy in such a way that it is not exposed to the outside world. And basically, like olden days when governments were running, all were paper copies. So nowadays everything is information is data. So everything is stored online. So it should be very, very confidential when it comes in the cyber world. And next is availability. So when it comes to availability, it's basically like if you're storing it somewhere, you should be also be able to retrieve it. So when you it's something like you store it. So for example, there's Amazon Web Services. You store it over there, and you must be in a situation where you can retrieve them. That's what availability means. And sorry, next slide. Yeah. So here we'll start discussing about threats that are very, very common in the world of cyberspace. So the first one I would love to discuss is malware. So malware is a software where people create it in such a way that they can attack a personal person to get an information or something like that. So basically, every day, if you're browsing something and without your knowledge, there might be a malware getting downloaded in the background. So, for example, as you see on the slides here, the different types of malware attacks like pop-up advertisements, spamming, phishing, downloading without knowing. So, what? Let me explain each of them. Pop-up advertisements. So this is a common way of malware getting into your system without your knowledge. So, assume you've gone to google.com and then you start searching for something, and suddenly a pop-up comes when you visit a website and you don't know what to do with it. So you might have seen all these advertisements like click this to win this, something like that. So that one, if you go ahead and click or something, there might be a malware getting downloaded in the backend or something like that. Next is spamming. So the first one is almost similar to what I just told. It's like spamming is nothing but sending inappropriate information or messages without any requests sent from your system. So you are not requesting for something and you're receiving it. So that's almost like a spam. So For example, you keep getting spam calls. So you didn't request for an insurance or a solar system, solar, what do you say, solar panels or all those stuff. So I keep getting those calls. That's the reason I remember these. And next is phishing. Phishing is nothing but it's a technique to acquire the personal information of a user. So there are people who call saying that, hi, we are from so and so place. So you have won something, and if you would like to win that, you need to give your personal information, and you have to share some personal information. So that is kind of very scary, and it is a basic phishing attack that really happens even today. So the next one is downloading without knowing. As I said, you so suppose maybe this is my personal experience. So maybe around 6 years back, we didn't have songs on the cloud like what do you say, Apple Music or Alexa Music or anything like that. So everything was like kind of file. So you download it from a website and you then copy them to your phone. That's what you were doing maybe 6 years back. That's what I was personally doing that. So when you're downloading, there might be some place where a malware gets installed with it. So this is a basic thing where each and every person must consider when it comes to malware attack. So next slide is existing vulnerability exploitations. So yeah, when you are getting attacked, it's not always something where you go in and you communicate with the internet and you get that. That's not always that way. So, oh, sorry. Yeah. So when it comes to this, it's a source from where the malware has come into the system. So here I would like to explain about hardware, software, and network. As the term says, hardware is nothing but maybe let me give you an example. So you have a laptop and you give it for service. So assume that you give it to a service where you really don't know, and they install a malware on the hardware and they give it to you without your knowledge. So you won't even know about it. So that is a kind of hardware attack. And second one is software. So when it comes to software, what I would like to say is assume that your friend has some uh, great softwares with him and he had malwares on his system, and you ask him, hey, can you give me those software because you have it, I don't want to purchase them, and he gives you on a thumb drive, and you take that thumb drive and you just insert it on your laptop, on your machine. That's almost like it is straightforward that if you don't have an antivirus or anything, you just insert it, and then when you start installing the software, even you get a malware with it. So this is one of the major things that's happened previously. Even today it might be happening as we have moved to a cloud infrastructure for everyone. Like when you say Gmail or anything, I have not experienced this these days as a software malware. Network. So in the previous slide, we explained about these. So these are all through some of them, yeah, some of them are through the network. So internet, basically, if you connect to the internet, there can be a source of malware coming through the internet. That's almost like a common thing that happens these days. Internet is the source. If you do not have a hardware or a software malware attack, definitely there is probably a higher chance of getting it through the network. So to overcome these, what I would definitely suggest would be maybe purchase an antivirus. That's the basic thing what every single person does. So let me give you an example here. Um, you buy a laptop worth maybe $2,000, and then you do not have an antivirus installed, and later uh, you might be careless or something like that, and then you might not be willing to buy an antivirus. Then hardware or software, nothing like that. So you are definitely connecting to the internet, and if you go and click on one of them and you get malware attack, then to fix that laptop would definitely cost you more. So the best precaution would definitely be to install an antivirus in such a way that, let it be a hardware or a software or a network method, which vulnerability would happen, would be detected by the antivirus. And as I have been using an antivirus, what I regularly do is I do a system scan and get checked always. So maybe if I go to a website where there is some I feel like there's a lot of pop-ups or anything, the next moment I would do is I would definitely close the browser, and then I would run an antivirus and see whether there are any malwares or anything that I've got installed with it. This is what I have been doing, but definitely we do not know when a malware would come from where. So the precaution is to install an antivirus for you to be safe. The next one is, where are the new threats coming from? So, what are the threats that attack can happen in the world of cyberspace? So all the people, let me read through the slide first. So the latest threat that the world is facing with it's with the innovation technology, correct? And the various new threats are via social media, smartphones, and cloud computing. So yes, yeah. So social media, when it comes to social media, I think all the people around the world are into social media, where we share our personal space, we share where we have been, when is our birth date, where do you live, everything, every single information of your personal information is in the social media platform. Let's take Facebook. You go in and you write where you live, what's your birth date, you might enter your phone number, uh, you have every single information there. So all these data, it's almost like you have shared it on the social media, maybe in a good way, but there are people who would misuse that for sure. That's one thing I would definitely tell in this era, where everyone using social media, it's super difficult to track where that attack came from. That's the first one. And second thing is the smartphone. So when it comes to smartphones, every single person has a smartphone. Like smartphone is almost like everyone must have that, so that they can be productive, they can get things done, everything. That's where smartphone comes into picture. And what is the threat with that? So let me tell you. You have a phone where you have your financial data, your banking information, your passwords for every single account or anything like that, and suddenly you lose your phone. Maybe these days you have that those technologies like erasing or anything like that, like erasing a smartphone data whenever when you lose them. That's actually helpful. But let's assume that there is no erasing technique at all. At that point of time, you are losing a lot of things there. You're losing money, you're losing your information, your data. I mean, to recover from that, it's very, very difficult. Like maybe you might have also placed your social security number in it. So it is kind of difficult when you lose a smartphone. So smartphones, what I would say here is smartphones are really good, but we have to also take certain precautions like two-step verification, multi-factor authorization, fingerprint scanner, or face recognition, or have lock or a passcode or something like that to each of your data. Whichever is confidential, keep it very, very confidential. So that's where smartphone comes into picture. So the next one is cloud computing. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss because I have been working on the cloud from maybe around 4 years. So Let's take an example of Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform or Azure, Microsoft Azure. Um, all these are huge companies. So, and every people want productive things to get done. So when it comes to enterprise companies like Google or Amazon or Microsoft, these guys, they don't want to affect their customers. They want everything on the cloud. Let's take Google. So you got, everyone might have an email account, like let it be Yahoo, Gmail, or Outlook, or anything. All these previously might have been stored on the servers where it is located at a single location. So if that it's called availability zone. So if that zone is down, you might lose the entire data. The data center, if the data center is gone, you might lose your entire data of Gmail records or your email records. So this is kind of difficult. That's where cloud computing came into picture, and you have your data distributed across maybe hundreds of servers where every disaster recovery is taken into picture. Now every single company wants to move into the cloud. Why is that? Because they don't want to lose their data. They want capital investment to be very less. They want maintenance costs to be very less. It's almost like, hey, Amazon, you take care of my maintenance, you take care of my servers, you take care of my data privacy or everything, and I give you the pressure on you. And I'm just using your service in such a way that we have a contract on each other. This is what every single company would do. So let's assume a small company like ABC, they start something like Amazon Web Services and they go outside the world and they have maybe two or three customers. So this is where I would say hackers would definitely try big companies as well as small companies. It's very risky. So small companies would be very easier for the hackers to get into access, or because they won't take security concern very majorly or anything like that. They might try the small companies like ABC, whatever I said. So let's assume there's a government company that wrote a contract with this smaller company called ABC Web Services or something like that. And later they get hacked on their system. Now, this entire data, it's leaked to the outside world, and maybe the called black market might use it to sell your information and get some money out of it. So what I would say is cloud computing is really great. It can be a small company or a big company. It does not matter at all. But when it comes to security measures that each of the companies takes, that's where the enterprise companies would go. So Amazon Web Services, they take their securities like super strict. People want to get their things very productive, so they choose bigger companies. Smaller companies, if they're taking them security measures almost like similar to Amazon, Microsoft, or Google, then they would definitely use the cloud computing to the maximum extent. That these are the new threats I wanted to discuss. These definitely tells that what people want and where the people must be careful. I think that's pretty much it from my end. Uh, Thank you.
Of course, let's go back to individual security. This is in the real world. You have door locks, burglar alarms, tall fences. For security with currency, you can put anti-counterfeiting measures. In airports, you can be prohibited to fly. You know, contraband items, those are like physical security. Now, invasions of privacy would be like illegally intercepting a phone call, going through someone's private records, taking pictures of video inside someone's home or a private place without their knowledge or consent. persistent or harassing phone calls, something which is unwanted. Publicly disclosing information about someone. This is commonly called doxing. In other words, I don't like person, which I'll call Smith, so I got Smith's personal criminal history. I'm going to publish it online. That's doxing. That's disclosing private information. Should it really be public? That's an invasion of privacy. And then, of course, publicizing anything about someone without their permission. So it's like, hey, I know just Smith got arrested for DWI at this point. Let me make it public. Unless someone looks for it, you shouldn't be advertising it.
In conclusion, the emerging technologically advanced devices have surrounded our daily life in such a way that the cyberspace has become an integrated part of our life. The privacy of an individual is the ability to control and use the data whenever the individual wants, where the security of the cyberspace is regarded as the framework that is implemented to protect and prevent individual privacy and combat against malicious threats and unauthorized access. So throughout the research, it can be concluded that the comparison of privacy and security of cyberspace is most arguable topic, as many security professionals and consumers rarely understand the difference between both concepts. It can also comprehend that privacy and cybersecurity are interconnected to each other, and there is no security without privacy and no privacy without security. Thanks, Professor. Thanks, everyone. Please let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.